Am I the asshole for calling the police because the family I tutor for keep leaving me with the kid? I am an after-school tutor. Homework help and co-curricular support mostly, test prep sometimes. I am pretty adamant and clear that you cannot leave the house while I'm working with your child because I am not childcare and I cannot be made responsible if something like a medical episode happens. I also don't want there to be the appearance of impropriety. I don't need them in the room or anything, just in the house. Even still, parents occasionally try and use me as an excuse to run a child-free errand or run to the office or whatever else they do. Usually after the first warning it stops, and there's also a financial penalty. Recently I had a family where the mom evidently left during our session. This was the first time that it had happened. Eventually I needed to leave for my next appointment. I texted and called her, but no response. I was not comfortable leaving the child 8 alone without an adult present. After 15 minutes of waiting and becoming late for the next child, I got nervous and called the police non-emergency line to ask what I should do next. They said they'd send someone over. The police arrived and said they'd wait with her. Of course, I have many angry calls and a negative review from this mother now, saying I've created a huge problem for her and the police think she's some kind of bad mother now, and a social services agent asked her all kinds of questions and how dare, etc. She claims she didn't realize the session was only 30 minutes and thought it would be okay to quickly leave around the corner because I would still be there when she returned. I was comfortable with the decision at first, but she seemed genuinely shaken up by her interactions with the social agent or officer she spoke to, unclear which from her message. And a friend of mine says this was an uncalled for escalation that could have actually placed the child in more jeopardy than my leaving after the appointment, or that I should have waited for the mom to return and spoken with her first as a warning. Am I the asshole? A friend of mine says this was an uncalled for escalation that could have actually placed the child in more jeopardy than my leaving after the appointment. Agreed. The parent should not have escalated things by leaving you alone with a kid and being uncontactable to the point that you had to call the cops. What were you supposed to do, just leave the 8-year-old on their own? For all you knew the mom had just gotten in a horrific accident and was unconscious or something. Someone needed to be contacted, and if she didn't leave you an emergency contact other than herself, you had no choice. Not the asshole. 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 You did exactly what you should have. You tried to reach her, you couldn't, so you called the non-emergency police line. You handled it perfectly, the kid was safe, and hopefully mom learned a valuable lesson in not abandoning her 8-year-old child with a somewhat stranger. She's only mad because now police know she plays fast and loose with her kid's safety. Police think she's some kind of bad mother. Gee, I wonder what kind of mother leaves their child with someone who has been adamant about not being left alone in a childcare position. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. The police think she is a bad mother because she is a bad mother. She broke your agreed-upon rules, left her kid with someone who is not a child care provider unsupervised, and was unreachable. She is shook because the professionals who deem if that was a bad move on her part agree it was a bad move. For me, while it's always preferable to do anything but call the cops, it's also a matter of, what alternatives were there? She didn't answer her phone, you couldn't leave the kid alone. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. You weren't able to stay and you tried to contact her. She left her child with a stranger and refused to answer her phone. If you were a different sort of person, imagine what could have happened. Since her common sense didn't alert her that her behavior wasn't okay, hopefully having the police called on her will. You did the right thing. ETA I had assumed that this was your first session with her child, but I reread and don't think that is the case. In that case, she knew how long the session was. So, she may have known and trusted you, but if that's true, she knew how long the session was and was trying to force you into giving her free childcare. You're still not the asshole. Not the asshole. Fellow tutor here, they are paying you to assist their child in a certain subjects, and nothing more. Tutors are not babysitters, and should not be assumed to be. You did the responsible thing here, and it isn't your fault the mom thought she could get away with something you clearly explained you wouldn't tolerate. She seemed genuinely shaken up by her interactions with the social agent or officer she spoke to. I'm sure she was, and for good reason. Child abandonment is not a great item to have on your file. But you're entirely blameless here. She broke your terms by leaving the house during the lesson, made herself unavailable to communication and failed to return in time for the end of the appointment. 3 strikes and you're out, ma'am. As further proof that she was way out of line, consider the fact that the police had time to arrive and have a short conversation with you. That's not a quickly around the corner errand, that's going AWOL for an extended period. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Come on, if she genuinely thought it was no big deal, she would have told you what she was doing. She didn't, she snuck out because she knew it was deceitful, dangerous, and wrong. She's a terrible parent, she deserves to be under suspicion. She needed to learn a lesson. Protecting her from the consequences of endangering her kid is not your responsibility. You not only did the right thing, you did the only logical thing. Not the asshole. She left the home without informing you, then failed to answer your calls or texts. You were not there to provide childcare and you had another appointment for which you were made late because this woman was irresponsible. She would have been just as upset if you'd left the kid home alone. Not the asshole. I've created a huge problem for her and the police think she's some kind of bad mother now and a social services agent asked her all kinds of questions and how dare, etc. She created a problem for herself, and while I cannot say she's a bad mother, she made a very poor choice. She claims she didn't realize the session was only 30 minutes and thought it would be okay to quickly leave around the corner because I would still be there when she returned. You've made it very clear that leaving is not acceptable, not matter how quick it is. Not the asshole. You did your job. The mother is just angry she got caught out taking advantage. Not the asshole. My child has a therapist come for an hour a week. Nobody has to tell me, stay home. I full well know that she's not a babysitter, she's there for his therapy. Not only did your client's mother leave but she significant other didn't even respond to your texts. WTF? You did the right thing. Not the asshole. That was a fair escalation since it sounds like you're self-employed. She should have read the contract, listened to you, and obeyed the rules. Who knows what the child would have gotten into if left alone, and while what you did was drastic, what other choice did you have with an appointment right after? Info, was the fact she couldn't leave and the session's length clearly communicated to her before the first lesson? And if so, was it in writing or verbally only? Not the asshole. Even if she knew you didn't watch kids, she didn't tell you she was leaving. That's in no way okay, especially since you could not get a hold of her. Don't feel guilty, she made her own bed. I am a recently retired public librarian. Our standard policy when a child ages 10 through 18, if they had no transport, was left at closing time was to wait outside the building with the child. Staff members in their vehicles and the child by the front door. If the parent did not arrive by 15 minutes past closing, we always allowed the child to try to reach a parent on the library phone, then we would call the police non-emergency number and wait for someone to arrive. If we were able to see the parent arrive, the person in charge would let them know that closing times are set in stone and that the first event was free, but that police would be called for any subsequent infractions. You are not the asshole, op. Not the asshole. She ignored your stated work boundaries. Then she ignored your calls. She ignored the care of her own child by not being with her child when she should have been. Now she gets to deal with the consequences of her actions. Your friend needs to mind their own business. Not the asshole. She is attempting to blame you for the consequences of her own actions. If you don't already have a contract, write one up that clearly states the rules and have parents sign it so that you have evidence when this happens again. And it will happen again because there are always those who take advantage of others. Not the asshole. But I feel like it would be to your great benefit to put the scope, including limitations, of your work in writing. That way there's no arguing that parents don't have a clear understanding of your role as a tutor, and nothing more. Not the asshole. You did the right thing. Not the asshole. You were clear and upfront that the parent should be there during tutoring sessions. She left then didn't answer her phone when you tried to call. If you left the kid alone, you would have been in the wrong. She was the irresponsible one. I work in a library. We allow unattended kids. Usually we get around 85. Even with COVID we get at least 20 elementary kids unattended a day. At 9 p.m. we close for the night. At 9:10 we call the cops on any kids still left behind, because that's neglect or abandonment. Not the asshole. Not the asshole you texted and called her and gave her every opportunity to respond and work with you. If you had left the 8-year-old alone and something bad happened, I feel pretty confident she would be blaming you. As a mom, I would never treat a tutor this way. This is her issue entirely. Not the asshole. Not only did she leave you alone with her child unexpectedly, without your full and informed consent, explicitly against your terms, she proceeded to become unreachable. When you were unable to get in touch with her, you were absolutely right to call someone. From my social worker perspective, good job. Excellent, 10 out of 10 professionalism on your part. I hope that mother is shaken up enough to not try and take advantage of anyone else. Definitely not the asshole. Info: do the parents you work with know that they're not allowed to leave during the session? How is that communicated to them? Verbally? Or is it tucked away in the contract in fine print? Not the asshole, you made it clear to this woman that you're not a babysitter, that you're a tutor and they can't leave you with their child to pop around the corner for any reason. After her not answering her phone and you waiting for 15 minutes, you were left with no alternative other than to call the police. Don't feel guilty, as none of this is your fault, and the excuse that she didn't know that the tutoring session was only 30 minutes doesn't sound plausible, as no doubt this would have been one of the first things discussed along with pay. Not the asshole at all. You told them up front that you do not want to be left alone with the child. She left anyway and without telling you, which tells me that she knew she wasn't supposed to. You tried calling and texting, without receiving a response. What in the hell would have happened if you had been trying to reach her for an actual emergency? Leaving an 8-year-old child alone is a non-option. The liabilities and the potential damage to your reputation if anything happened were huge. Calling the authorities was the only real option that you had besides waiting for her to decide to come home and making you even later. She needs to be shaken up, and hopefully her head has been shaken out of her ass. Not the asshole. She seemed genuinely shaken by her interaction with the social agent or officer she spoke to. Some people need to be shaken. Not the asshole. She didn't answer the phone. What else could you do? NTA, you would not have known how long the mother would be gone. Not the asshole, and you did exactly the right thing. Not the asshole, she should have asked you before leaving her child with you. She didn't know it was only a 30-minute session? Ask. She didn't answer her phone when you called? That's totally her problem. Who just leaves their kid with someone without so much as a heads up? You are a tutor, not a freaking babysitter. So she did this to herself, 100% this is her fault. Don't feel bad. Not the asshole, you done informed all the parents not to leave the house, and you are not a child care provider. She left and caused you to be late for another appointment and you could not reach her. I honestly wonder how long the cops had to wait. Not the asshole. Unless the family is already under close scrutiny by family services, this is barely going to register on their radar. You, however, were not responsible for the child even during the session. What kind of parent leaves their 8-year-old with a stranger? Leaving an 8-year-old alone would have been irresponsible, so you really did the only thing you could. Wait, so being left alone at 8 years old isn't normal? If I leave my dog with a friend, I will immediately answer their calls. What kind of a parent leaves their 8-year-old child with a somewhat stranger and doesn't even answer their calls? Seriously? And she gets to complaints because she looks like a bad parent? Not the asshole. Not sure if you could have found someone else, neighbor, relative, etc., to watch the child while you have your next appointment. However, better to have someone, even the police, watch the child instead of leaving the child alone. Make sure you put the "do not leave the house" in writing and very clear in your contract so there's no misunderstanding. Not the asshole, you are not a babysitter and you didn't want to leave the child alone. The mother wasn't answering you, what else were you supposed to do? If she didn't want to be seen as a poor mother, she shouldn't have left her child. If you had just left, they'd have claimed you were an asshole for leaving the kid alone. It wasn't your responsibility. Not the asshole. I'm a parent and I would not even consider leaving my kid for 5 minutes with someone I hadn't explicitly asked to care for my child. My understanding from the info provided is the mom just left. And didn't say a word. How were you supposed to know she wasn't gone for good? You did the right thing and it's on her for making such a dumb decision. NTA. If I don't pick my kid up from my actual childcarer, they would be within their right to take the same actions. Obviously if I communicate I am late or something, they wouldn't. For a tutor who explicitly is not supposed to be looking after the kid, it's irresponsible of them to just expect you to do that. Not the asshole, she really didn't leave you any other choice. Mother of 4, here you are completely not the asshole. I have all manner of lessons, practices for my kids when it's not corona times, and she is full of crap. Every mom knows how long the lesson is, and any mom worth her salt is tied to her phone when away from their kid 'cause shit happens. She is just running her mouth to save face. Getting the police called on her really shook her up and she is lashing out. It's not personal, it's her reactionary social instincts. She is very most definitely responsible, she is the parent. If her leaving her kid and not knowing for how long she might be able to leave, is how she runs her life, this phone call to the police was the wake-up call she likely needed to pay more attention to her kid. Could you have handled it differently? Yes. But you didn't create the problem to begin with. Not the asshole. In the future just charge them $100 per hour after the session is over. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. Which part of "you may not leave while I am tutoring" did the mother not understand? I don't care how long she thought the session was. She played a stupid game and she won a stupid prize. Not the asshole. I'm stuck on the part where the mom doesn't know how long the session is but leaves anyway. If this was their first session, then you're basically a stranger. Who leaves their child with a total stranger? Who doesn't answer the phone when said stranger calls? I have a feeling social services is involved because this mother does this a lot. NTA, you do the right thing. Abso-fucking-lutely not the asshole. WTF. Even if she didn't ignore your texts and calls, endangering you and her child, why the fuck would she think it's acceptable to leave you alone in the house? You didn't sign up to be a babysitter. You signed up to tutor her kid. You absolutely did the right thing getting the cops involved. What if the mother had gotten into an accident while she was out? You had no way of knowing why she was gone or why she wasn't answering your calls. You made a best call judgment and it was perfectly reasonable.